Hi everyone, today I'm going to be replacing the fuel pump in my 2001 Isuzu Rodeo with a 3.2 liter engine. I'm doing this for two reasons. One, the fuel sending unit's gone bad and the fuel gauge fluctuates up and down, and the fuel low fuel indicator light starts flashing frequently. I've also gotten a check engine light for high voltage from the fuel sending unit, so I need to replace that. And I'm also getting low fuel pressure at the fuel rail, so I went ahead and bought a replacement pump, and I'm going to be replacing it into the fuel tank today. So let's go ahead and get started. As you can see, I've got the vehicle up on a combination of jack stands and wheel ramps. I didn't have four wheel ramps, so I used some jack stands in the front. The front of the vehicle is a little bit lower, which is not ideal, but that's all I could do with what I had. I had put it in four-wheel drive before I backed it up onto the ramps, and I've got the wheels chalked. I'm not going to give you instructions on how to jack up your vehicle, just because I don't want to be responsible for your safety. So just please use caution if you do this repair yourself. You don't absolutely have to jack it up, but after crawling under the vehicle, I realized it was going to make it a lot easier to get the tank out from underneath. So anyway, the next step I'm going to do is to relieve the fuel pressure from the system. To do that, we simply need to start the engine, and then we will remove the fuse for the fuel pump. On the passenger side of your engine bay, right beside the battery, there is a cover for the fuse box, and you can see right there, the fuse is labeled fuel pump. So that diagram corresponds to these fuses here, and the third fuse down, which is that 21, which is upside down. See if you can see that. There you go. But that corresponds to the fuel pump fuse. So we'll start the vehicle, and we'll take a pair of pliers and pull that fuse out, and eventually the engine will die after a few seconds as it uses up the last bit of fuel in the fuel lines. So let's go ahead and do that. Going to start the engine. Now, carefully remove that fuse. And you can hear the engine sputter and kick out, and so now we've used up the fuel in the fuel rail. I'm going to, just to be sure, I'm going to turn the engine off and then try to start it again. Excuse me. And now we should have successfully used up all the fuel. So we're ready to move on. I just need to get some tools together, and we'll crawl underneath the vehicle, and I'll show you how we're going to get the tank out. Okay, the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and lower my spare tire. My vehicle has the spare tire stored under the rear. Obviously some rodeos have them attached to the rear tailgate, so it's not going to be in your way in that case, but in my case I'm going to get it out of the way so that I have room to operate back here by the fuel tank. Really quick though, I wanted to mention that you do want to disconnect your battery once you remove the fuse for the fuel pump and relieve the pressure in the line. Go ahead and disconnect your battery. You don't want any sparks while you're working on taking the fuel pump out. You do want to try to run as much fuel out of your gas tank as you can, but a lot of times it's difficult to gauge when your fuel sending unit has gone bad, which it has in my case. So anyway, just be very cautious, disconnect your battery to be safe. So anyway, moving along, to remove your spare tire, there's simply a winch mechanism that, and to lower it, you put your jack handle in through this little opening in the rear bumper, and there's a receiver in there that the handle will slide into, and you simply turn it counterclockwise, and you can see the tire starting to come down. If you look up underneath, there's a little a clip that slides through the center of the wheel. So once you get the tire down low enough, you can lift it up by hand and relieve the tension on the cable that holds that clip, and just turn the clip 90 degrees and slide it up through the middle. So simple process, but doing this should make this process a lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead and get this lowered and removed, and we'll crawl up under the vehicle and see what we're working with. Okay, I've got the spare tire removed now, and I think the next thing I'm going to do is to remove the filler hose from the fuel tank, which if you follow, let's see, right here's the fill tube, connects right here with a hose clamp, looks like, and then I'm guessing that is just a breather to prevent, like a vacuum effect when you're filling the gas tank. Right there's a hose clamp, so I'll remove those two. I'm assuming there's supposed to be a hose connection here, and the hose or whatever it is dry rotted. I don't know if that's just a vent or if there's supposed to be like an evap hose connected there or whatever, but in my case it's missing, so I think I need to get those two removed. And on the back side there's looks like a hard plastic line. I'm hoping there's going to be enough slack in that to just let it come down with the tank when I drop it, because I don't think I can get to that. And then in the background there, I think you can see the fuel pump itself. Supposedly there's enough slack in the wires to drop the tank first and then disconnect everything. So that's my strategy. So I'm going to get these disconnected, and then we'll work on lowering the tank down. We'll have to use a jack to support it while we disconnect the bolts holding the skid plate up, but I'll show you that part next. Okay, so I ended up disconnecting the gas fill hose from this end where it connects to this rigid tube that goes to the gas cap, rather than the other end like I was talking about in the last clip. It just made it a lot easier to get a hose pick in from this direction and loosen that hose off this nipple here. So it just had a hose clamp here that I removed and worked a hose pick in around it and got it disconnected. And of course I've got some duct tape over the end of it because that goes directly to the gas tank and you're going to get gas fumes coming out. So I just covered the end to keep the fumes at bay. But I'm having a really difficult time getting this other hose disconnected. I got the hose clamp removed from either end, tried pulling it off this way and pulling it off that direction, and I just can't get it to come off. There's just not much room to work with, and because it's such a short piece of hose, it wants to just resist you pushing in either direction. So what I'm going to try is, if you follow that hose, it connects to this little canister, which is held in place by two 10mm bolts. I'm going to try to remove those, which will give me some slack. And I'm hoping that when I drop the fuel tank, I'll have enough slack to either just leave that hose connected altogether, or maybe I can work it more easily once the fuel tank is dropped down. So that's my plan. So with that said, let's crawl up under the vehicle and I'll show you what we're going to have to do to remove the fuel tank. Pardon the shaky video, I'm going to slide up under the truck now. Alright, so I'm up under the fuel tank. Of course there's a skid plate it's connected to, and the skid plate is connected to the frame in several locations. I think there's 6 bolts total. Some of them connect to the frame, some of them just connect to some mounts for the skid plate. Anyway, there's one here, and to give you a point of reference, here's the rear differential right there. So if you look beside the drive shaft, there's one in that corner. There's another here by the rear driver's side wheel. There's a bolt there that connects the tank to the skid plate, I believe. There's the third bolt that holds the skid plate to the frame. There's the fourth. There's the fifth. The sixth. And then there's, towards the middle of the vehicle, there's two more nuts or bolts that hold the gas tank to the skid plate. You can see there's a strap front and back that goes over top of the tank and holds it to the skid plate. So I've been spraying these bolts with PB Blaster for a few minutes. I'm hoping they're going to break loose. I believe it's a 15mm bolt. So what we need to do is put a jack and a board or a piece of plywood or something up underneath the middle of the skid plate to support it, and then we're going to have to slide back under here, disconnect all these bolts, and then use the jack to lower the tank in the skid plate. Empty, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal, but again, I don't know how much fuel's in there. Gauging by my odometer, I've gone probably 3/4 of a tank, but with the fuel pressure issue, I'm not running efficiently. I may have more or less than that. So anyway, that's the process. Let me get the jack in place, and then we'll crawl under here and pull these bolts out, and we'll see what happens. Alright, so you can see I've got the tank partially lowered now. I'm sorry I wasn't able to film that portion of it, but I needed all hands on deck for that, so I couldn't hold the camera. But I got really lucky in that none of the 6 bolts that hold the skid plate to the frame were rusted. You know, I live in Virginia, and our winters aren't that harsh, and you know, I guess I just got lucky that I didn't have any rust on those bolts. You know, if you live up north and have a lot of rust issues from road salt, then you might have a little bit more of a struggle. But I got really lucky. They came out pretty easily. I just used a breaker bar and a 14mm nut. I think in the last clip I may have stated that those were 15mm nuts, but I was incorrect. They're actually 14mm. And like I said, I just used a breaker bar to get them loose, and then a little cordless impact to run them out. And you know, of course, I had the jack underneath it supporting the weight, so I was able to just back all the 6 nuts out and then get out from under the truck and gently lower the tank down with the jack. And you can see the piece of plywood I put under there to support it. Now, I did want to point out a couple of things. When you lower it down, these fuel lines right here clip into this green clip, and I didn't catch that ahead of time, so they kind of popped out violently. Thankfully, I don't think anything broke, but just be aware of that. If you can unclip them before you drop the tank, that would be best. Then, of course, you can see the top of the fuel pump there. I'm going to need to undo these 2 connections here. I've got to figure out how they connect, and I'll show you that. And then you've got electrical connections here and here. Those should just unclip easily. And this tube here that I showed in one of the earlier clips actually just runs around and reconnects there on the tank, so you don't have to worry about that connecting to anything. And I was able to, when I dropped the tank a little bit, I was able to get up under the rear of the vehicle and pull off that hose that I showed you earlier that I couldn't get loose. And again, this hose, or whatever this is, I don't know, it was missing when I got under there, so I need to try to figure out what goes there, if anything. So, so far so good. Let me figure out how these lines disconnect, and I'll show you that part next. Then we'll take the tank outside and try to remove the pump.